Hey everyone! If you enjoyed this video, the full version is available on Patreon. I'll be uploading all my content there going forward.
Chapter 1. My head. In the dark jungle, a boy in pajamas complained, clutching his head. Why does it hurt so much all of a sudden? The boy was completely unaware that he was no longer in his familiar surroundings. Wait, where am I? After complaining, the boy finally realized how he had ended up in the forest. Looking at the unfamiliar surroundings, the boy was a little bewildered. The boy's name was Du Fan. He was an ordinary college student, someone who had just escaped the ordeal of the college entrance examination. I finally got into my dream university and moved in, but the very next morning, I found myself in a vast, pristine forest. Looking at the towering trees, some hundreds of meters tall, Du Fan didn't think he had been kidnapped. He was joking. Where could he find so many trees that were hundreds of meters tall? Even if there were, they would be located across half a planet. Who would go to such lengths for a joke or a kidnapping, especially since I'm an orphan and have nowhere to attract criminals? Besides, there's no need to put yourself in such a remote place after being kidnapped. So, it can't be like in novels, where someone time traveled. After Du Fan reached this conclusion, a completely emotionless voice rang in Du Fan's mind. Welcome, lords, to the grand stage of interdimensional competition. I am the dimensional warfare system. Du Fan looked around, searching for the source of the sound, but how could he possibly find the source of a sound when he couldn't even hear footsteps clearly while playing games? I'm sure you're all confused, but you don't have time to be confused. I'm only giving you 4 days to adapt to and develop your race. I don't want to explain the details to you, go check the crystals on your wrists yourselves. By the way, let me warn you all, don't let me down. In 4 days, you will face your first monster invasion. Failure means death. The voice's last words made Du Fan feel as if he were approaching death, a feeling he had experienced before, just like the disaster he had faced years ago. Thinking of this, Du Fan involuntarily clutched his head, the pain in his brain causing him to break out in a cold sweat. Every time I think about this, my brain experiences intense pain. The more I recall it, the more painful it becomes. But if I don't dwell on it, the pain stops. Moreover, since Du Fan is an orphan, he simply doesn't have the financial means to treat this problem. It's already quite remarkable that he was able to get into university. Du Fan sat there, the pain in his head seemingly less intense than before. What was going on? Du Fan put the questions that had arisen out of his mind. His immediate priority was to survive the monster invasion 4 days later. Du Fan didn't believe this was a joke. If it were true, he would be dead, and Du Fan wouldn't dare joke about his own life. Looking at the crystal on her wrist, she could only pin her hopes on that strange crystal now. Welcome, lords. This is a place where war decides everything. The purpose of this game is very simple, to have a little fun. So you can use cheats, I won't care. Of course, if you can unify this place, then you can come to me and obtain the right to kill me. I really hope that someone can successfully carry out this and end my life. Come on, you useless creatures. Keep trying. Everything you can imagine is here. Keep striving. As long as you keep getting stronger, you will achieve things you never even dared to dream of. Strive to become stronger. Looking at the introduction, Du Fan was a little confused. What was going on? That guy was looking for someone to end his life? What kind of nonsense was that? Are they tired of living? Or what? After all, why would anyone want to raise someone to kill them, especially someone who could dump them here without anyone noticing? Du Fan shook his head. Forget it. He wasn't qualified to touch the truth of all this, so he should just focus on developing the business honestly. The next thing is your attribute panel. Let's see how your basic information looks. Lord ID, 000, 146-7890. Lord's name, Du Fan. Combat strength, 2. Race of mastery, none. Faction, none. Alliance, none. Control plane, none. Item, 1 race selection scroll. Evaluation, a powerless and insignificant person with no reason to live, whose very act of breathing is superfluous and wasteful. Looking at this description, Du Fan was a little annoyed. What kind of evaluation is this? What do you mean by saying that not surviving is necessary? Are you trying to piss me off? The statement "there's no need to live" is completely unnecessary, there's no point in including it here. Wasn't the person looking for someone to fight? Instead, they're being so dismissive, it's infuriating. Du Fan angrily took out his race extraction scroll and extracted his race's essence. I hope to find some solace in the race selection process, to comfort myself after being heartbroken by the evaluation. Congratulations, Lord, on acquiring one of the 10 hidden races, the Zerg. May you lead the Zerg to unify this chaotic world and eliminate the mastermind behind it all. Du Fan was overjoyed. Although he didn't know what the 10 hidden races were, the things they hid were generally extremely powerful, so he was definitely not going to lose out. But the message following that notification was serious, it really expressed a strong desire for us to unify the world and take down the mastermind behind it all. Has that guy gone mad? Du Fan shook his head helplessly and continued to examine the race he had acquired, the Zerg. Zerg, one of the 10 hidden races, possessing an extremely terrifying ability to expand, and is the most warlike race among the 10 hidden races. Racial traits. 1. Unlimited loyalty, the Zerg will never betray their lord, making them one of the most reliable races. When the lord is developing, there is no need to consider racial well-being or implement appropriate policies to appease the people. The overlord only needs to issue orders, and no matter how ruthless or cruel the orders are, the Zerg will carry them out without fail, even at the cost of the lives of all Zerg units. 2. The war race, a super race born of race, utterly incapable of fear. Every Zerg unit is born a qualified warrior. There are no civilian classes, all are war units, striving to conquer the world for the overlord. 3. Gene absorption, the Zerg possess extremely powerful evolutionary capabilities, especially after acquiring the Zerg Genius Research Hero. This grants them immense racial evolutionary power, allowing them to absorb useful gene fragments from various organisms to enhance the combat effectiveness of Zerg units. 4. Hyper-evolution, after absorbing enough energy, Zerg units can evolve on their own. As long as there is enough energy, elite Zerg units can be mass-produced. 5. Super adaptability, Zerg units can adapt to most harsh environments. In various harsh environments, they will make minor changes to their bodies so that they can perform at 100% of their strength. Assessment, an incredibly powerful race, suited for destructive mining, capable of rapidly destroying an entire plane. They are an extremely dangerous race, possessing unparalleled war potential, easily sustaining their war effort without needing logistical support. Furthermore, their indomitable will to die and terrifying appearance allow the Zerg to easily shatter their opponent's psychological defenses, making them an exceptionally powerful race. Chapter 2. Du Fan looked at the information on the brochure and was a little surprised. Was it really that amazing? However, what Du Fan cared about most was that the Zerg didn't need to consider the feelings of their lower-level units, so he wouldn't have to rack his brains thinking about policies or worrying that his people would betray him because of their habitability. After all, it's extremely difficult for an ordinary person to become a qualified lord, since they've never experienced such a thing before. Even if they have, it's only in games, like the game Civilization. In the end, they may very well be consumed by their own desires, becoming the very person they once despised, ultimately overthrown by the oppressed populace, and meet their demise. However, Du Fan doesn't need to worry too much about people's livelihoods, he only needs to focus on development, which greatly saves him the brain power he would otherwise expend. Politics is the most troublesome and the most detestable thing. The most important thing is absolute loyalty. After all, every living being has desires, so there is a possibility of being turned against them. Not everyone is a saint, able to be like Mencius, able to regard wealth as dirt. Most people will succumb to sweet talk, so the Zerg's 100% loyalty is practically a god-tier skill. Race selection complete. Lord, please select a base location. You have 3 days to choose the location of your capital city. Once the capital location is determined, it cannot be changed. Du Fan felt a little helpless after hearing this, since a wave of monsters would invade in 4 days, and if they didn't handle it well, they would die. A normal person would prioritize developing their territory and surviving. They wouldn't have time to consider the location of their capital. Survival is far more important than development. As for the capital's location being unfavorable, well, that's just how it is. Du Fan looked around and decided to spend a day looking for a suitable place to establish the capital. The location of the capital was very important. We simply can't find a suitable location, and we have absolutely no idea what resources are available in the surrounding area. After searching for a while, Du Fan gave up. This vast forest was too torturous. It was full of bushes and was not the kind of place Du Fan had in mind to establish a capital. However, after walking for a long time, he still couldn't get out of this forest. Finally, Du Fan arrived near a river and chose to establish his capital on an island in the lake. Fortunately, he was invincible for the first 4 days. Before the capital was established, all the monsters in this plain fell into a deep sleep. Otherwise, Du Fan would have been swallowed by monsters as he walked, let alone swim to the island in the lake. I've chosen to establish my capital here, Du Fan said, looking at the cave before him. Staying inside the cave provides concealment and serves as a natural bunker. Furthermore, the cave contains a massive hollow at the bottom, resembling an underground world, which would allow the Zerg to expand downwards, making it a very viable option. Du Fan believed the Zerg wouldn't dislike this place, after all, they were insects. Moreover, the Zerg are 100% loyal to me, so I don't have to worry about them rebelling. The only problem is whether Du Fan can adapt to this place. After all, the Zerg can adapt to most environments. If things get really bad, we can have the Zerg dig this place up and level this mountain. As soon as Du Fan finished speaking, a white light flashed in the cave, followed by some flesh and blood. With the movement of muscles, a huge insect nest rose from the ground in the next moment. Du Fan was stunned by what he saw. It was simply a miracle. This place was indeed magical. Could his headaches also be cured? Could he gain eternal life? Du Fan didn't think he could take down the mastermind, so he figured he'd just stick to getting immortality. Immortality is something everyone dreams of. Even if one achieves immortality, one still needs immense strength. It's impossible to live a subservient life after gaining immortality. Furthermore, one must have the ability to protect oneself after achieving immortality, otherwise, one will still be killed, rendering immortality meaningless. As the white light dissipated, a level 1 insect hive appeared before Du Fan's eyes. However, the next moment, Du Fan couldn't take it anymore and vomited. The level 1 insect hive was truly disgusting. Just thinking about having to live in such a disgusting place made Du Fan feel a little unbearable, as he was used to living in a clean and tidy cement house. Suddenly having to sleep on a creature covered in mucus, with no skin tissue, and muscles directly exposed and constantly wriggling, was practically testing Du Fan's psychological defenses. No wonder it can terrify enemies to the point of losing their will to fight. Even I, the Lord, can't stand it. Du Fan forced himself to stay awake and approached the insect hive. Was he really going to go inside? But then I thought, if I can't develop properly, I'll die during the first monster invasion, and my dream of immortality will be shattered. No pain, no gain, Du Fan thought to himself as he prepared to step inside. My lord, if you cannot accept the hive, you can control it from the outside. A face appeared before Du Fan, speaking respectfully and sincerely. Du Fan was startled by the sudden appearance of the face. Looking at the delicate face, Du Fan was a little surprised, as it really didn't match the disgusting structure of the insect hive. If the Overlord finds it unsuitable, I can revert it to its original form. As he spoke, his face transformed back into its original Zerg appearance. Forget it, let's just go with the one from before. Du Fan saw the adjutant's original appearance. It looked quite fitting, but it was just too terrifying. If he were to report to him that night, Du Fan was certain he would be scared half to death. So, to avoid becoming the first lord to be scared to death by his own subordinate, he decided to have his adjutant back. Although his delicate face didn't suit the insect hive, it was better than being scared half to death. Yes, Master. So, Lieutenant, I'd like to know, can Zerg units transform into humanoid forms like you? I'm sorry, Overmind, this is not allowed. It would drastically reduce the combat effectiveness of Zerg units. As for why I can grow humans, it's because I'm not a fixed form Zerg unit. All other Zerg units are fixed form, arbitrarily changing them will reduce their combat effectiveness. Hearing his adjutant's explanation, Du Fan felt a little frustrated. However, for the sake of combat effectiveness, sacrificing appearance was not out of the question, so he obediently accepted the ferocious appearance of the Zerg units. Then, Lieutenant, list out all the Zerg units I can currently produce. All right, but Master, we only have 3 combat unit recruitment slots available, while there are 8 Tier 1 units in total. Therefore, we need to select 3 units from these 8 as our initial units. Then, Adjutant, can the number of recruits for this combat unit be increased? Yes, Overlord. It only requires building some special Zerg structures and spending a small amount of resources. The only trouble is collecting blueprints, but of course, you can research it after obtaining research units. The adjutant answered Du Fan's questions in detail. After listening, Du Fan felt a little better. Although there were only 3 at the beginning, he could increase them, so there wouldn't be any problem. In other words, as long as you spend the time, you can get your hands on it, the only question is whether it will still be of use by then. Rest assured, Overlord, they will still be useful. Some Zerg units require Zerg units, not larvae, so these Zerg units will still be useful. Chapter 3. Du Fan can choose from 8 units: swift-walking insects, needle-toothed mosquitoes, leaf-cutter ants, leeches, night ants, stone-eating ants, grenadiers, and micro-wasps. Looking at the dazzling array of organizations, Du Fan felt a little lost, completely unsure which ones to choose as his first batch of responders. Oh, right, Lieutenant, I haven't given you a name yet. Du Fan looked at his adjutant, who was about to ask him what the best option was, since the adjutant knew more about Zerg units and could provide the best choice. My lord, a name is merely a label, an adjutant need no name. That's not a good idea. It's a little troublesome to keep calling you adjutant, especially since I'll definitely be training new adjutants to assist me in managing the Zerg. I can't possibly call them all adjutants. Du Fan didn't want it to manage everything on its own. Although it didn't feel tired, an insect's ability to work is ultimately limited, and it would definitely have to differentiate its tasks in the future. I understand, Your Majesty. Please bestow a name upon me. The adjutant lowered his head. He wasn't stupid, he quickly understood and said respectfully. Although the adjutant lowered his head, to Du Fan it was almost the same as not lowering his head at all. The size of the insect hive was simply too enormous, and the adjutant was only showing his face. Then let's call her Natasha. I hope Natasha can help me get through this first monster invasion. After pondering for a while, Du Fan searched through his limited knowledge and came up with a suitable name. It might not be the most suitable, but who cares? As long as it sounds good to him, that's fine. Let others do what they want. Thank you for naming me, Lord. All right, Natasha, enough with the nonsense, just come up with a suitable solution. Understood, Master. I think we can start with leafcutter ants, velociraptors, and needle-toothed mosquitoes. Reason? Du Fan asked, looking at Natasha's face. We currently only have 2 resource-gathering units to choose from, leafcutter ants and stone-eating ants. Leafcutter ants are very suitable for collecting energy in the jungle, although they are not as fast as stone-eating ants, they have the advantage of sustainable regeneration. Stone-eating ants do gather resources very quickly, but this exposes their nests and is destructive mining. We cannot treat this plane like this, it will be detrimental to the evolution of our primary plane. Du Fan nodded. It seems that the Zerg are not only capable of destructive mining, but also know how to exercise restraint and sustainable regeneration, which is very good. However, what does evolution in this plane mean? My lord, this will be told to you in 4 days, I cannot tell you now. When Natasha said those words, she was extremely depressed. Failing to complete the Overmind's command was a disgrace. If she weren't the only remaining hive, Natasha would have wanted to commit suicide. All right, I understand. It seems that Guy doesn't want us to know certain things beforehand. Let's not overthink it. Du Fan patted Natasha's head to comfort her. He had sensed Natasha's thoughts just now, and he had gained a deeper understanding of the Zerg's incredible loyalty. To have thoughts of suicide simply because she hadn't completed her mission was just too crazy. Natasha, don't have suicidal thoughts so easily. You are my only hive. Even if other hives appear in the future, you will be irreplaceable because you represent my capital. Do you understand? Du Fan patted Natasha's head and said. Understood, Master. Let's continue with the analysis we just got to. Okay, continue, Natasha. Yes, Overlord. As for the other 2 Zerg units, the reason is that the Raptor is the only frontal melee ground unit. Although the Night Ant also has considerable combat capabilities, it is much more expensive and not suitable as a consumable. As for why I chose the needle mosquito over the grenade thrower, it's based on our current situation. Grenade throwers are better suited for open areas and not the current environment. Also, the cost of 1 grenade thrower is enough to produce 4 needle mosquitoes. We don't need high-end combat power right now, we need quantity. Monsters below Tier 3, no matter how strong or talented, can be overwhelmed by sheer numbers. So, we don't need powerful units right now. Okay, I understand. Du Fan nodded. Now that he understood, it was good. Let's start producing Zerg units. But let's take a look at the introductions of these 3 Zerg units first. Familiarize ourselves with their basic information. Leafcutter Ant, a Tier 1 Zerg unit, it is the Zerg's basic resource gathering unit. It has no combat capabilities, only resource gathering abilities. Component 1, Mycelial Gland Tail, which allows leafcutter worker ants to create a mycelial tumor that absorbs various plants and transforms them into crystal energy. Component 2, Sharp-Toothed Mouth. Leafcutter ants have extremely sharp mouths, which can easily cut plants below Tier 1, Level 5. Combat Strength, 2. Production Cost, 1 larva, 5 units of crystal. Population occupied, 1. Swiftbug, a Tier 1 Zerg unit, it is the most basic Zerg ground combat unit. It is very weak, but its large numbers and excellent teamwork make up for its weakness. Component 1, Glandular Secretor. This is a bodily tissue evolved by the Zerg to grant them short-term bursts of powerful combat abilities. It can rapidly secrete various hormones that enhance their fighting prowess. Therefore, the Zerg's lifespan is shorter compared to other Zerg units. Component 2, Toothed Blade Injector. Developed by the Swiftbug heroes to enhance the Swiftbug's combat effectiveness and reduce casualties, this component allows the Swiftbug to tear open an enemy's skin with its sharp forelimbs, injecting a coagulant through the contacting toothed blade. It can inject 0.5 ml at a time, and only 5 ml is needed to defeat an enemy of the same tier. Component 3, Devouring Evolution. This is an ability possessed by the Raptor in all Zerg units. However, due to its special composition, the Raptor can undergo uncontrollable evolution by devouring the strange genes of organisms, resulting in special Raptors. Combat Strength, 7. Production Cost, 1 larva, 5 crystals, 1 egg twins. 1 occupies a population of 0.5. Needle Mosquito, a Tier 1 Zerg unit with powerful short-range attack capabilities. It is one of the few combat units among low-level Zerg. Its melee capabilities are weak. Once it gets close, even a leafcutter worker ant can easily take down 10 needle mosquitoes. Component 1, Powerful Muscles. To gain ranged attack capabilities, the spiky mosquito has increased the number of muscles on its back, possessing as many as 4,000 muscles, while humans only have 629. And this is just the muscles on the spiky mosquito's back. Therefore, the spiky mosquito can kill targets of a much higher level. Component 2, Corrosive Bone Stings. The highly lethal weapon of the needle mosquito. Bone stings containing corrosive toxins are a nightmare for any creature. Just one sting contains enough toxins to easily take down 5 elephants. The super powerful toxicity has made the needle mosquito a favorite of low-level commanders. Component 3, Split Mosquitoes. Because the needle mosquitoes focus all their energy on attacking, they cannot perfectly integrate with the swarms and gain shared vision. To overcome this problem, the third developer urgently developed this feature. It allows the split mosquitoes, with their 5-minute lifespan, to obtain the exact location of the swarm and launch precise attacks. Combat Strength, 12. Production Cost, 1 larva, 15 crystals. Population Occupied, 1. Wait, Natasha, I want to know, why don't the needle mosquitoes just change their body structure and connect with the hive's will? After reading it, Du Fan asked Natasha a question. Alright, Overmind, actually, gaining control of the hive's will isn't that simple. The Overmind should know that Zerg units are generally quite unintelligent, right? Du Fan nodded. He had read some information while resting on the road and learned about the fact that Zerg units had low intelligence, as well as the importance of the hive will. The term hive will appeared most frequently. In reality, it was sacrificed to integrate with the hive's will. The needle mosquito's brain is inherently small, and number 3 was unwilling to change it. Furthermore, the Overmind didn't care about this low-level unit at the time, so there was no requirement to integrate it with the hive's will. Thus, the needle mosquito became the only unit not integrated into the hive's will. Du Fan understood. It was determined by the circumstances of the time. After all, the Zerg at that time would not produce this. Even if they did not connect with the hive's will, if they did not produce it, then nothing would happen, and it would be considered a failure. But why was this unit, which was considered a failure, added to the conscription list? Won't something bad happen? Rest assured, Overlord, every Zerg unit is 100% loyal to you. Except for the mimicry larvae, almost all are 100% loyal. Furthermore, although the needle-like insects cannot access the hive's will, it only means they cannot obtain the insect's will. This is easily resolved. Simply assigning a certain number of swift-moving insects to keep an eye on things will suffice. When number 3 was developed, preparations were already made to deal with this, so please rest assured, Overlord. Du Fan nodded. Although number 3 hadn't connected the needle mosquito to the hive's will, taking countermeasures was still quite good. Indeed, no matter how crazy number 3 was, he was always on the side of the Zerg, working hard for the Zerg's development. He wouldn't do anything detrimental to the Zerg, as that would violate the nature of Zerg units. Any Zerg unit that connected to the hive's will and dared to harbor disloyal thoughts would be immediately and mercilessly eliminated. However, in reality, very few Zerg units have actually violated this tactic. Just like the struggle between religions, Trying to make a fanatical follower of a rival religion abandon one's own is wishful thinking. Aside from those mimicking larvae that reduce their bindings for the purpose of invasion, Zerg units generally distrust mimicking larvae and keep them under close surveillance, eliminating any unusual activity immediately. They don't give any chances. After all, there have been such tragedies in the history of the Zerg, which is why the Zerg are so strict with the mimicry larvae, giving them no chances whatsoever. Of course, the possibility of the spiky mosquitoes betraying us in the future cannot be ruled out, but those are things we don't know, and can only be simple speculation. Chapter 4. Okay, how many larvae and crystals do we have? Du Fan glanced at the Zerg units on the data panel and asked Natasha. Master, a Tier 1 insect hive can produce 10 eggs per day, with initial resources including 10 larvae and 100 units of crystal. We have a total of 15 larvae and 100 units of crystal. By the way, Natasha, do the larvae only respawn after they're all used up? Du Fan immediately felt like an idiot as soon as he said it. No, but there's a limit to the number of larvae a Tier 1 hive can support. A Tier 1 hive can hold 30 larvae and provide a population cap of 20. So how do we increase the population cap? We can't just keep building Zerg hives to expand, can we? Du Fan couldn't help but ask after hearing about the population cap. He'd heard about it when he visited the Zerg units before, so he figured he might as well ask honestly. Upgrading to a Tier 2 hive will solve this problem. Currently, the only way to increase the population cap is by increasing the number of hives. However, don't worry, Master, the construction cost of a Tier 1 hive is very low, and the production speed of swift bugs and needle bugs is very fast, averaging 1 swift bug every 90 seconds. Furthermore, as the number of hives increases, the production speed of swift bugs will also increase. Let's see how quickly the swarm population recovers. Okay, I understand. Du Fan nodded. So, Master, how many units do we need to produce? 2 needle-like mosquitoes, 4 pairs of fast-moving insects, and 10 leafcutter worker ants. Overlord, I don't recommend doing this. Although it's a safe period now, the Zerg are not truly protected. When the swarm approaches, they will still awaken and attack. Therefore, wait a minute, can't I just follow them? Du Fan interrupted Natasha. This won't work, Overmind. The security guarantee he granted only extends to a 500-meter radius around the capital, and to the vicinity of lords who haven't established capitals. The Overmind has already established a capital, so the security guarantee is no longer sufficient to protect him from being far from it. All sorts of monsters can now roam freely within 500 meters of the capital. For the Zerg's safety, I think we should switch the number of leafcutter ants and raptors. 10 pairs of raptors and 4 leafcutter ants would be better. Alright. Du Fan thought he could safely gather energy by leading the Zerg units, but now it seems he was overthinking it. Although the mastermind behind it all said they were allowed to use cheats, the most basic rules were still strictly enforced, leaving them no chance to exploit the system. There's no other way but to obediently follow Natasha's advice. And it's true, thank goodness for Natasha, otherwise I would have given birth so hastily and been killed, leaving me dumbfounded. Therefore, having a smart and 100% loyal lieutenant is very good, at least it can reduce one's own mistakes. Moreover, Natasha's starting point is based on the development of the Zerg, which makes it even better. There's absolutely no need to worry that Natasha's actions are driven by ulterior motives, nor is there any fear that Natasha might harm you. The 16 larvae on the nest moved their bodies toward the evolution chamber and began their first evolution. A Tier 1 Zerg hive has 2 evolution chambers, which can produce 2 Zerg units at a time, enhance Zerg units, or add the latest discoveries of Zerg researchers to already produced units to increase their combat effectiveness. The evolution chamber is of paramount importance, although there are many of them, their value is the same as that of other important buildings. 30 seconds later, 2 insect eggs emerged from behind the evolution chamber and fell to the ground. As soon as the insect eggs come into contact with air, the thin membrane on their surface begins to harden rapidly, taking about 30 seconds, which is when the second batch of eggs hatches. As the hardening process was complete, cracks appeared on the eggshell. Through the translucent shell, Du Fan could see the insects moving inside the egg. As the insects moved, the newly hardened eggshell broke apart. As the insects inside became more and more active, the eggs burst open, and the insects inside hatched. Green slime flowed over their newborn bodies, slowly dripping to the ground. The newborn swift-walking insects didn't care about the sticky liquid on their bodies and started gnawing on the eggshells. What's this? Du Fan looked at the swift-step insects, a little bewildered, completely unaware of what they were doing. My lord, the eggshell is a delicious feast for newly hatched Zerg, allowing them to quickly leave their juvenile stage and directly enter combat-ready adulthood. Oh, so, Natasha, how long do swiftworms live? Well, Overlord, this needs to be considered from many aspects, and I can't give you an exact figure. The Zerg can pause cellular aging and energy consumption through suspended animation, feigning death or hibernation, so even with a short lifespan, they can live a very long time. Plus, the battles are extremely intense, so most Zerg don't even live past half their lifespan. However, I've found some hypothetical data regarding the Zerg's lifespan. No need. Du Fan interrupted Natasha. There was absolutely no need to know the hypothetical data. Du Fan was just worried that the Zerg units might die prematurely because they were forcibly brought into adulthood. Now it seems I was overthinking it. After all, the Zerg must have their own plans for daring to do this, and as a newly appointed Zerg overlord, I still have a lot to learn. Learning makes me happy, that's the only way Du Fan could comfort himself. Looking at those long strings of words was pure torture for him. What kind of happiness did learning bring? It was the pain it caused him that was the truth. But for the sake of his long-cherished dream of immortality, he still went all out. Du Fan continued reading. As for commanding the Zerg units, Du Fan delegated it all to Natasha. In any case, Natasha was 100% loyal to him, so there was no need to worry about any adverse effects from delegating authority. If you want to reclaim your rights, isn't it just a matter of saying a few words? You don't need to worry about being sidelined or left powerless. Thinking of this, Du Fan sincerely thanked God for his good fortune in acquiring the Zerg, a race completely loyal to him. He didn't need to worry too much about them and could even hand them over to the Zerg units. With the birth of 10 pairs of swift bugs completed, under Natasha's control, all the swift bugs ran outwards and began their first hunt. Du Fan glanced at the departing swift step insect, then turned to look at the information panel, which was currently displaying the chapter on the bioconversion pool. The bioconversion pool is the Zerg's confidence to sustain their war effort through combat. It allows them to obtain substantial amounts of energy by converting the corpses of monsters. Similarly, it is also effective for Zerg units, although only 20% of the energy can be recovered. However, this is still a considerable gain. You have to understand that after a major battle, the individual Zerg units, which are relatively weak, suffer heavy casualties. Even recovering 20% of the dead is a huge amount. It can save a lot of mining energy. Most importantly, the biotransformation pool is the only gene extraction tool I have been able to obtain so far. Acquiring genes is the best way for the Zerg to strengthen and evolve. For the progress of the Zerg, and even more so for their own dream of immortality, the bioconversion pool must be secured in advance. This not only allows for the acquisition of genes but also accelerates development, enabling the acquisition of more insect hives and thus increasing the chances of surviving the first monster invasion. Since this is the first monster invasion, it means there will be a second, and who knows, a third. If you want to live a good life, you must have great strength, otherwise, even if you have immortality, you will not be able to enjoy the good life in the future. Immortality is not just about fearing death, but also about enjoying a good life. A good life is everyone's idea, no one dislikes a comfortable life, and even fewer people like a poor and difficult one. Living a comfortable life and enjoying a wonderful life, that's Du Fan's ideal. However, this might be unrealistic. After all, people have a stereotypical impression of the Zerg, which is associated with a series of negative terms such as being violent, bloodthirsty, and destructive. Therefore, Du Fan's future may not be too bright, but Du Fan is not aware of this yet. Chapter 5. After leaving the hive, the swift-moving swarm began searching for monsters aimlessly. Without the microbees, the velociraptor worm wanders around aimlessly like a headless fly. The Swiftbringer has virtually no experience in searching for enemies. This task is primarily the responsibility of the Microbringer and other Zerg units. The Zerg have a very clear division of labor. The Raptors are dedicated combat units, and they are completely ignorant of everything else. They are not capable of anything else, and the knowledge given to the Raptors is only related to combat. They are not given any other knowledge. Meanwhile, the microbees responsible for reconnaissance focused all their resources on scouting, becoming super scouts. By giving up all combat capabilities, they also gave up many other things, such as defense. Microbes are extremely fragile. Basically, any creature with a bit of strength can easily kill a microbe. In pursuit of superior reconnaissance capabilities, microbes have sacrificed everything, even their own lives. Logically speaking, biological evolution is all about protecting oneself, which is common sense in nature. However, the evolution of Zerg units is all based on the needs of the Overmind and is carried out specifically by Zerg researchers. The swift bug searches within a radius of 500 to 800 meters centered on the hive. This is the range that the hive will of a first-tier hive can receive. Moreover, there are basically no monsters within 500 meters of the hive, so it can only hunt monsters within the circle. But that doesn't matter. It won't be long before a new hive can be built, and then the area covered by the hives will be even larger. This is a dimensional war, and the main type of battle is cross-dimensional warfare. However, cross-dimensional warfare has a prerequisite: you must first control the entire dimension. Therefore, the insect hive will definitely cover the entire plane to ensure the safety of the plane and absolutely not allow anyone to stab us in the back at that time. Defeat in the interdimensional war is a minor matter, but it could endanger Du Fan's life, which is absolutely unacceptable. The swift-running swarm of swift-walking insects suddenly stopped, and a giant one-horned rhinoceros appeared in front of them. The one-horned rhinoceros turned its head and glanced at the swift bug, whose strength was only at the first tier and 1 star, and snorted disdainfully. It's quite normal for the unicorn rhinoceros to have such a superior attitude towards other insects. After all, the unicorn rhinoceros is a tier 1, 4-star insect, and its strength is much higher than that of the swift walker insect. Furthermore, the one-horned rhinoceros simply believed that the swift-walking bugs were a bunch of bullies who relied on numbers to win, so how could they dare to attack him? They should be thanking their lucky stars if I don't deal with them myself, and then they'll run away in a flash. Besides, I'm full now, so there's no need to fight with these little guys. I'll just store them and eat them slowly later, so I don't go hungry in the coming winter. The swift bug, seeing the rhinoceros roaring in an attempt to scare it away, scoffed disdainfully. Although a single swift bug was insignificant, a large number of them together were enough to deal with the rhinoceros. Seeing that the swift bug dared to challenge it, the one-horned rhinoceros charged at the swift bug in a rage, determined to wipe out all these little creatures that didn't take it seriously. Anyway, as long as you take down a few, these little guys will scatter and flee. The one-horned rhinoceros has already eliminated countless monsters that rely on numbers through its ferocity. This time will be no different. As long as I fully demonstrate my strength, some cowards will run away, and that will be my time to slaughter them all. The one-horned rhinoceros's idea was beautiful and quite conventional, but the swarm was not like that. The swarm was fearless and ruthless. Every Zerg unit is stripped of its self-preservation instincts at the moment of its birth, Zerg units only know how to fight and have no self-preservation instincts whatsoever. Even if they are seriously injured, they will forge ahead and do their best to complete the mission. Unless they are completely unable to move, they will carry out the mission. Therefore, the rhinoceros's idea of scaring away the insect swarm was doomed to fail, and it would become the swarm's first prey. In the near future, it will become part of the history explained in the Zerg Development Museum, commemorating the development of the Zerg. The rhinoceros charged at full speed toward the swift bug, which fearlessly met it head-on, colliding with the rhinoceros. The enormous size difference sent the swift bug flying, the rhinoceros horn piercing straight through its body, leaving it completely exposed. However, the resilient and painless Zerg felt nothing, and without the slightest hesitation, the swift bringer swung its claws and plunged them straight into the rhinoceros's eye, simultaneously injecting a coagulant. The velociraptor that wasn't pierced pounced on the one-horned rhinoceros and began biting and scratching. After being knocked away, the swift-footed bug immediately rushed back to the battlefield and joined the strangulation. The one-horned rhinoceros roared, and then its entire body burst into white light. Two spikes rose from the ground and instantly pierced through three swift-walking insects. One of them, unlucky enough to have its head blown off by a ground spike, was considered dead, but the swift bug remained fearless. They continued their fierce attack, showing no fear of their comrades' deaths, but instead launching an even more ferocious assault. The swift bug, pierced by the spikes, struggled to pull itself out, wanting to rejoin the battle. Seeing these weak creatures acting so wildly, the one-horned rhinoceros was terrified, completely unable to understand why these creatures were so unafraid of death. The biological instinct for survival compelled the one-horned rhinoceros to quicken its pace, struggling to shake off the insectoids clinging to its body, and dashing away into the distance. The surge of adrenaline within the one-horned rhinoceros greatly increased its speed, propelling it forward at breakneck speed, causing the swift-walking insects on its body to teeter on the brink of collapse. However, the accelerated blood flow caused the toxin injected into the one-horned rhinoceros to take effect more quickly, and the rhinoceros soon collapsed due to the toxin. The Zerg that had been thrown off also caught up, with the two most seriously injured swift bugs limping over. Then, the velociraptor pounced on the one-horned rhinoceros and began to bite and feed. The swift-footed cricket's voracious feeding attracted two rabbits. If Du Fan saw this, he would surely be shocked. Where did such large rabbits come from? This rabbit was as big as a cow, and its teeth looked a little strange, like those of a carnivore. There was also some blood left on its lips. The swift bug swallowed the rhinoceros meat and continued eating without looking back, completely ignoring the two Tier 1, 3-star rabbits that appeared behind it. Seeing that these weak creatures ignored them, the two rabbits roared and prepared to fire a fireball at the swift bug. At the same time, two bone needles flew from not far away, instantly piercing their skulls and giving the rabbit no chance to launch an attack. The attackers were none other than the needle-toothed mosquitoes, which, led by a leafcutter ant, found the velociraptor insects feeding. The spiky mosquitoes trudged over to the two rabbits and began to eat. The one-horned rhinoceros had just fled in the direction of the insect hive. The one-horned rhinoceros knew that this place was safe, no creature could stay conscious there and would be randomly teleported away. That was the place where it could escape these crazy little guys. But the one-horned rhinoceros never expected that it wouldn't make it inside alive. In fact, even if it had, the one-horned rhinoceros's fate wouldn't have changed. Other creatures would have fallen unconscious, but the swift-walking worm wouldn't. Here, aside from the insectoid units, almost all monsters will fall into a sleep state, so they will definitely be wiped out. It simply provides the swarm with a safe place to devour, allowing them to properly level up. The leafcutter worker ants are still building fungal tumors and don't have the time or resources to establish a biotransformation pool. So the best solution right now is for them to be devoured by the swarm and see if any elite units can be produced. Through the will of the Zerg hive, Du Fan discovered the recent skirmish. The Zerg's combat strength was indeed formidable. When Du Fan saw the battle, he was also very surprised. He never expected the swarm of insects to be so ferocious, completely disregarding their own safety, like killing machines. However, as the master, Du Fan was not afraid. On the contrary, he felt at ease. With such a powerful swarm of insects, his safety was guaranteed, and his dream of immortality was more certain. To the enemy, this was a cruel weapon, a symbol of a savage and bloodthirsty race, a synonym for fear, but none of that mattered to Du Fan. Du Fan would never abandon the Zerg because of their prejudice. If he lost the Zerg, he would only have one fate, death. Therefore, he was destined to be at odds with the vast majority of people. Natasha, when can we start building the bioconversion pool? Du Fan withdrew his fantasies about the future. The future was mostly certain, and all he could do was keep getting stronger and defeat all obstacles in his path. Using the current leafcutter ants to obtain crystals, it will take another 8 hours. We can start constructing the bioconversion pool tomorrow morning. Good. Master, it seems one of our units has broken through to the elite level. Natasha suddenly exclaimed to Du Fan, startled. What? Du Fan exclaimed in surprise, barely able to believe his ears. Chapter 6. Du Fan could hardly believe his ears. You see, it's extremely difficult for Zerg units to be promoted to elite units. Especially for weak Zerg units like the Raptor, it's simple. The raptor is too easy to kill, it simply doesn't have enough time to devour enough flesh. They wouldn't survive long enough to even think about competing with the advanced Zerg for food. The advanced Zerg units require far more flesh and blood to advance, so most of these resources are allocated to the advanced Zerg to reduce the consumption of some elemental energy. Like crystals, source elements are resources needed by production units. However, source elements are always more precious and scarcer than crystals. Flesh and blood can basically only be transformed into crystals. The amount of source elements produced by this transformation is far less than that obtained through mining, so much so that the value of recycling it is less than the value gained by high-level units consuming it. While swift bugs can certainly be enhanced by consuming crystals within the evolution chamber, this is unnecessary, as enhanced swift bugs are still inferior to advanced Zerg. The resources spent on upgrading the swift bug might be enough to produce one or more units with the same combat power as the upgraded swift bug. Furthermore, swift bugs have a limit to their enhancement potential, so they are generally not enhanced by consuming crystals. Enhancement relies entirely on luck. Du Fan was so surprised to hear that a type of swift-moving insect had been promoted to an elite unit. Yes, Overlord, one of the swift bugs has advanced. Should we recall it so the hive can check on it? Natasha said to Du Fan after reviewing the swift bug's advancement status again. Okay, we must figure out how this swift bug accomplished that in one fell swoop. Du Fan nodded and began to examine it. One convenient aspect of the hive wool is that it can record battle footage, much like video recording, providing combat experience to various Zerg units and allowing newly formed Zerg to quickly adapt to the enemy's combat style. This is why the Zerg can win in a protracted war, their adaptability is truly terrifying. Of course, there are also videos from various units, some from the last 30 minutes. Once more than 30 minutes have passed, the hive will delete the first 30 minutes of video and then retain a new copy. In short, everything that happened to this swift bug in the past 30 minutes is visible. It can see what happened to the missing Zerg units. In essence, it monitors Zerg units to prevent them from mutating and thus breaking free from the hive's will. Although it hadn't actually happened, the Overlord was still very worried and added this feature specifically for this purpose. However, this feature made it much easier for researchers to study the mutations of Zerg units. Its scientific significance far outweighed its legal significance, and the Overlord was even praised by the usually stern first researcher for it. Speaking of the first researcher, Du Fan was also a little flustered. The evaluations of him by previous generations of rulers really made Du Fan a little uneasy. A madman who would stop at nothing for the development of the Zerg. In short, every Zerg overmind would accommodate this pillar of Zerg development. There was no other way, one of his Zerglings was worth all the other Zerg researchers. They couldn't afford to offend him. Every overmind finds this guy's language system extremely difficult to understand. He speaks very simply, yes, very simply, just 3 or 4 words. What he means, you guess for yourself. I don't care, I only care about the evolution of the Zerg. When he gets crazy, he even dares to confront the overmind, but no overmind has ever dared to confront him directly. There's no way around it, he's just too important, and he's single-mindedly focused on the evolution of the Zerg. In many cases, it was accommodated for the sake of the Zerg's development. Of course, it has never disappointed any generation of overminds, and it has always been able to complete its missions on time and perfectly. Du Fan shook his head. He'd wait until he could revive the first researcher before making a decision. Ultimately, he needed to see for himself to know, he couldn't always trust what others said, and he couldn't rely on just one side of the story. Soon, the upgraded swift bug returned, lay down at Du Fan's feet, and relaxed its body. Du Fan reached out and petted the big dog at his feet. The swift bug, like a dog, obediently let Du Fan pet it. Du Fan glanced at them and realized that the biggest difference between elite and ordinary swift bug units was that they had more scales on their bodies. From the outside, it just looked like they had more scales, which slightly increased their defense. Other than that, Du Fan couldn't tell anything else. It seems like it's gotten a little bigger. I don't know if it's just my imagination or if it's actually gotten bigger. It looks about the same size as before. I'd better have Natasha check it out. Go to the evolution chamber and give it a thorough check. Du Fan said, patting the swift bug's head. If he couldn't figure it out, he'd better leave it to the professionals. The swift-walking insect immediately entered the evolution chamber and began its examination. How about it? 10 minutes later, the swift bug emerged. Du Fan kicked it away with a hint of disgust. The swift bug was covered in the sticky hatching fluid, which was truly repulsive. The swift-walking worm lay dejectedly to one side, awaiting its master's instructions. The check is complete. It should be the effect of consuming a crystal, Natasha said, peeking out and glancing at the swift bug. Crystal? What crystal? Du Fan was a little confused. It must be because those monsters can unleash magical attacks that the swift bug swallowed them. The energy contained within allowed the swift bug to advance its cultivation. I didn't expect to find these things here. Those things, Natasha, didn't you encounter these things before? Du Fan asked Natasha incredulously. No. This is the first time we've encountered these creatures. Previously, we've only fought against technologically advanced civilizations, we've never come into contact with civilizations based on immortals, gods, or magic, so naturally we couldn't obtain these things. I see. Du Fan said with some surprise. It seemed that this war of 10,000 races was not just talk, but for real. After sighing, Du Fan seemed to remember something, glanced at the swift bug, and then asked Natasha about it. By the way, Natasha, will there be any problems with this promotion? Rest assured, Overlord, this swift bug's advancement is without problem, however. But what? Du Fan suddenly erupted with killing intent. Du Fan would never allow any uncontrollable factors to appear in his swarm. Master, please rest assured, there's nothing wrong with it. It just has some extra strange energy within it, but it's too little. I suspect that after one more advancement, it will be able to unleash earth spikes like that one-horned rhinoceros. Really? Natasha, keep a close eye on it. Deal with any unusual activity immediately. Understood. Du Fan had a slight headache. He wished he had a first researcher. Although Natasha was very versatile, she was not a research-oriented Zerg and had no way of researching what the alien energy in the Swift Step Zerg would bring. She could only determine that there was alien energy. Hopefully, the researchers won't have too much trouble obtaining it. For now, we can only wait and see if this velociraptor worm undergoes any mutations. Du Fan made up his mind that if it became even slightly out of control, he would eliminate it immediately, leaving no danger around him. There was nothing I could do, I was simply too weak and had absolutely no ability to protect myself. Chapter 7. After watching the upgraded Swiftbug leave, Du Fan began to prepare his little place for the night. As for checking information, nothing was more important than getting a good night's sleep. It's impossible to actually sleep inside the Zerg hive. The Zerg are strong, but it's truly unsuitable for human habitation. Indeed, the Zerg have never considered the issue of housing. For the Zerg, who are oblivious to everything, even sleeping in the rain wouldn't make them feel anything. The Zerg's robust vitality gives them unparalleled immunity, so they don't have to worry about getting sick. If they do get sick, it means that there is a problem with the overall genes of that unit, and it needs to be remade and improved. So this situation is unlikely to occur. If it does happen, the infected Zerg units will be destroyed, a new antibody will be designed, and then implanted into the uninfected Zerg units to give them immunity to the virus. Although Du Fan could also possess this ability, he has not yet transformed into a Dominator. To transform into a Dominator, one needs to establish a Dominator evolution chamber, which is no simple undertaking. Natasha, however, believed that the transformation should wait until the first researcher appeared, as this would be safer and would also allow them to become more powerful. As for Du Fan himself, he was still unwilling to change his race. However, he had no way to become stronger. At least for now, he had no other way to become stronger except to become the Overlord. Only by becoming stronger could he possibly achieve immortality. However, Du Fan was conflicted because he didn't want to give up his human identity. Nevertheless, Du Fan still wanted to try. If he still couldn't find a way to become stronger before the first researcher came out, then he would transform into a Overmind in the way of the Zerg. Du Fan knew that his weakness would be the Zerg's greatest weakness, and he didn't want the Zerg empire he had painstakingly built to be destroyed because of his own weakness. Therefore, becoming stronger was a must, and he absolutely could not give up. With the help of leafcutter ants, Du Fan successfully carved out a small cave inside the mountain cave as his resting place. The fire was obtained thanks to the leafcutter ants. The leafcutter ants are indeed very versatile. Apart from combat, they are excellent in everything else. The firewood was all brought back by the leafcutter ants. The surrounding trees suffered terribly, with half of their leaves being plucked off by the leafcutter ants. Give these trees a chance to recover. The growth rate here is very fast. According to Natasha's prediction, based on the appearance left by the leafcutter ants, it will only take 3 or 4 days for them to recover. This isn't like the outside world, everything here grows very quickly, which means the seasons are also very short. For example, springtime only lasts 7 days. Basically, every season only lasts 7 days, except for summer and winter, which have 1 more day. According to Natasha, Du Fan was certain that the summers would be extremely hot, and he needed to prepare for sun protection. The winters would be very cold, reaching temperatures as low as -30 degrees Celsius, and he needed to prepare fire-starting materials. Therefore, the leafcutter worker ants dug according to the above 2 standards, preparing 2 caves for Du Fan. Du Fan also asked Natasha how she knew, but Natasha didn't know either. These things had inexplicably appeared in her database. Du Fan was nearly scared to death at the time. The gene bank had been breached. Natasha quickly comforted Du Fan, saying that leaving a message was quite simple. It wasn't like it had infiltrated the gene bank, but merely left a message on the communication channel. Hearing this, Du Fan relaxed. If he were to take a copy of all the genes from the Zerg gene pool, he could produce specialized units, which would put him in danger. However, listening to Natasha, I'm not worried at all. Natasha told Du Fan directly. The reason there are 10 hidden races is not because they are so powerful, but because that guy can't decipher their core database, hence the name 10 Hidden Races. Upon hearing this, Du Fan nearly choked on his breath. That meant there were weaker individuals among the 10 hidden races. It seems that we cannot underestimate any race, and we must be prepared for a tough battle. At night, Du Fan was roasting a piece of wild animal meat, the outermost edge of which looked like it had been gnawed by a dog. There was nothing they could do, it was Du Fan's fault for not giving proper orders. Those simple-minded Zerg units, knowing that Du Fan wanted a piece of meat, ate the leftover piece and gave it to him. Du Fan couldn't afford to lose his temper, after all, he only wanted them to bring back the meat, and besides, he couldn't bring himself to get angry at some rather dim-witted swift-step insects. The swift-walking insect's intelligence is only at the level of an infant, not much higher, and it has no way to get angry at these creatures whose minds are like children. Du Fan looked at the roasted meat and unconsciously swallowed. He hadn't eaten anything for half a day since he came in, and hadn't even drunk much water. I'm afraid of getting an upset stomach from drinking untreated water. Getting an upset stomach here is really dangerous, and there's no medicine available. So I'll wait and boil some water in the stone pot carved by the leafcutter ants. Du Fan took a bite of the beast meat. The meat was perfect, neither too fatty nor too lean, and it was also very elastic. Even without any seasoning, it was delicious. Is this what Tier 1, 3-star beef tastes like? It's amazing. Is it true that the stronger the monster, the better its meat? Du Fan was thinking, but he didn't stop eating. He ate one bite after another, and soon he had finished the whole piece of meat, which weighed about 500 grams. After finishing his meal, Du Fan lay down on the bed covered with palm leaves and let out a satisfied burp. It's delicious. If I had some seasonings and tools, I could definitely make it even better. This place is a foodie's paradise. Du Fan said contentedly. As an orphan, Du Fan has honed his culinary skills to a level comparable to some small restaurant chefs. He has also taught himself many dishes, and now, with the excellent ingredients available here, he can finally enjoy a delicious meal. Suddenly, Du Fan felt a heat in his lower abdomen. The next moment, Du Fan clutched his stomach, curled up in pain, cold sweat dripped down his forehead, and his body convulsed. Sensing that something was wrong with Du Fan, several leafcutter worker ants quickly rushed over. They anxiously surrounded Du Fan, unsure of what to do. Whether Du Fan was poisoned by the meat or something else, Natasha quickly guessed that Du Fan had eaten too much. Monster meat of a certain level contains a lot of energy, which is incomparable to ordinary meat. Although Du Fan only ate a single serving, when converted into normal meat, it felt like he had eaten more than 10 kilograms. He was so full that a surge of energy condensed in his abdomen. Du Fan, being just an ordinary human, had no way to deal with it. Of course, it was also possible that the creature's flesh contained toxins. The toxin content was so low that it was practically negligible for Zerg units, but for Du Fan, it was a lethal dose. Natasha is extremely anxious, but she's helpless. Not only can she not confirm what's going on, but she also has no way to treat Du Fan. Alas, the functions of a Tier 1 insect hive are simply too limited. The evolution chamber was now useless. Anxious, Natasha kept changing the perspective of the leafcutter ants, watching the unconscious Du Fan while silently praying for him to get through this ordeal safely. Half an hour later, Du Fan opened his eyes. The excruciating pain in his abdomen had subsided. Du Fan lay on the bed, panting heavily. "My lord, you're all right, that's wonderful," Natasha said excitedly to Du Fan. When Du Fan fainted, Natasha was nearly scared to death. At the same time, Natasha made up her mind not to let Du Fan eat these things of unknown origin anymore. Through the will of the insect hive, Du Fan understood Natasha's worries. However, the fact that she couldn't eat these delicious ingredients in the future was a real headache. However, compared to his own life was more important. He planned to have the researchers study the matter later to see how he could eat these things. But what should he eat now? The next day, Du Fan looked at the nutrient solution in the stone pot and said with a gloomy expression, "Natasha, how about we try something else? I really don't want to eat this stuff." "No, master. What if what happened last night happens again? Unless you kill me, master, I absolutely will not allow you to try these unknown foods again." Natasha said seriously, "I absolutely will not allow Du Fan to face such a crisis again. It's an insult to me as his adjutant." Natasha was in immense pain. Last night, she had failed to protect Du Fan, which was the biggest mistake she had ever made, and it was unforgivable. Du Fan had no choice but to compromise. He couldn't possibly punish an insect that hadn't done anything wrong. After all, she was worried about her own safety. But Du Fan really didn't want to eat this completely tasteless stuff. Du Fan also knew that unless he killed her, it was impossible for her to make him eat those unfamiliar foods, as Zerg units possessed extremely strong resistance to poison. A toxin that can kill itself is meaningless to Zerg units. If it can kill Zerg units, then it could kill itself tens of thousands of times over. Relying on Zerg units to test the poison is absurd. You don't want the Zerg units to be fine while you yourself are killed. In the end, Du Fan compromised, but at the same time, he secretly resolved to become the master body, and he would absolutely not let go of these delicious foods. That's right. Du Fan decided to transform into a dominator because he couldn't eat these delicious foods. It was that simple. He made up his mind about something he had been hesitating about before. There was no way around it. For Du Fan, a foodie, it was truly unbearable to turn to that tasteless nutrient solution when faced with such delicious ingredients and prepared delicacies. My stomach, which I had developed before, simply couldn't get used to these nutrient solutions. They were like water, although they provided the energy my body needed, they didn't make me feel full at all, and the feeling of an empty stomach was just too uncomfortable. This is simply unbearable, so transforming into a dominant being is a foregone conclusion. As for the knot in my heart, where there is delicious food is more important. Chapter 8. Du Fan downed the tasteless nutrient solution in one gulp. Better a short, sharp pain than a long, drawn-out one, it would save him from feeling nauseous just looking at it. Only then did Du Fan look at the other functions on the system target. Yesterday, he had basically been learning about the Zerg and hadn't done much research on the system itself. I glanced at the dimensional warfare system. Apart from the race interface, there were many useful functions, such as the alliance function, but it was currently grayed out and unusable. Currently, the chat function is available, which is divided into private chat and group chat. Group chat does not consume resources, but each person only has 500 words per day. It is not calculated based on the number of words spoken, but on the number of words spoken. But it's all right, since there are 6,000 people in this area. If there were no restrictions, it would be impossible to keep up. The screen would be filled with refreshing comments, and it would be terrifying if everyone said something. Therefore, restrictions are still necessary, otherwise, there's no point in watching at all, just keep refreshing the page. I glanced at the messages and saw that some guys had actually foolishly posted their races. I don't know if they're just plain stupid or if they have some kind of conspiracy, but it doesn't matter anyway, it's none of my business. However, this information is completely useless, it's all nonsense. Many people are struggling to go back, but if someone can bring you here, who can take you back? It's just a waste of time. But now it seems there are far more people here than just a few. Is it possible that this guy brought all of humanity here? After all, he couldn't have only brought a tiny number of people. The fact that there are multiple area codes indicates that the number of people must be substantial. What I need to do now is to gain a certain status in this area, so that they won't attack me, giving me enough time to mass-produce troops, and then I can easily crush them. As for private chats, Du Fan didn't have any need for them. Anyway, most of the people he knew weren't in this area, and even those he did know weren't friends who truly respected him. So it's not very useful. We can see how it goes when we need it. The last feature is trading. Seeing this option, Du Fan became a little curious about how trading works. After opening the trading window, Du Fan saw a dazzling array of goods, all kinds of items, with the most common being requests to buy food. There's never too much food, especially since they don't have enough. Not every race can provide nutrient solutions like the Zerg hive to solve their food problem. Therefore, wise lords will still hoard food. Although they are modern people, the current worlds of all lords are in ancient civilizations, so food is definitely the most important thing. Currently, their primary means of obtaining food still relies on farming. In this primitive era, farming is heavily dependent on the weather. Any natural disaster can result in a complete crop failure. Moreover, some races have very large appetites, and relying solely on their own cultivation may not be enough. They need to import some to make up for the missing parts, and if all else fails, they can stockpile some. No matter what, food is always very important. Furthermore, there will inevitably be some lords in places where cultivation is impossible. In that case, the only way for them to obtain food is through the trading area of the dimensional war system, by selling resources to acquire food. In reality, the reason why Du Fan was restricted from massing units through a Zerg hive was not due to food issues. Zerg units are very resistant to hunger and have a high energy utilization rate, but they still need to eat, just a little less. However, the hive will of a tier 1 hive can only cover 20 Zerg units, no more than that, otherwise it becomes difficult to command them. Tomorrow, the insect hive will have more than enough nutrient solution. So, could I sell some of it? I believe those who sell resources will be very happy with their trades, and I can then obtain some useful minerals. By using the bioconversion pool, you can quickly obtain crystals. You heard right, the bioconversion pool can not only convert corpses to obtain crystals, but also convert crystals themselves, although the efficiency will be a little lower. However, sacrificing a little resources to speed up the acquisition is still worthwhile. Now it's a competition of development speed, to see who can develop faster. As long as I can outpace them in technology, I will not be a fish to be slaughtered, but a sharp knife, a blade that can dominate this region. Natasha, how much nutrient solution can you offer for sale? Du Fan closed the trading panel and asked Natasha. This is something we should ask Natasha. If we give away too much and it affects the Swiftbug's energy replenishment, then it's not worth it. My lord, you may sell 1 pound of nutrient solution. After a moment's thought, Natasha gave precise figures. She needed to leave enough nutrient solution for Du Fan to eat, and also leave some for the larvae. Larvae are not as resistant to starvation as mature Zerg units, they are quite fragile, just like Du Fan is now. 1 pound. Du Fan thought for a moment. Although it wasn't much, an adult only needed 25 grams of nutrient solution a day to ensure normal energy intake. 1 pound could probably feed 20 people for a day. He believed that someone would definitely buy it. As for the taste, he couldn't tell them that. However, some savvy individuals might have guessed that the next step is pricing. So, what's the best way to price it? Du Fan didn't want to sell it too low, nor did he want to sell it too cheaply. But he couldn't figure out how to sell it at a more cost-effective price. After all, Du Fan was just a college student, and he was already doing well if he didn't lose money when buying things. Just then, Du Fan saw the system pricing. That's right, the system kindly enabled this feature for all merchants. This feature is quite helpful. It can help authenticate items being traded to prevent being scammed. Its main focus is on integrity. Of course, you don't have to specify everything, as long as you don't write poison as medicine. This feature is extremely important. Items that haven't been authenticated by the system are unlikely to be purchased. However, those who are a little more clever will avoid writing poisonous instead of poisonous food, and instead right has certain side effects. This won't trigger any system penalties, it's still up to the Lord to make the judgment. In short, you can't lie, but you can use the art of language to deceive others, it's quite versatile. After glancing at the standard evaluation given by the system based on the current situation, Du Fan divided the 1 jin of nutrient solution into 2 portions, and agreed to purchase half a ton of minerals for each portion. All kinds of minerals were acceptable. For other resources, please contact him privately. Du Fan directly raised the price by 10%. Anyway, the supply couldn't meet the demand, so even if he raised the price a little, there would still be people buying. The market wasn't saturated, there was a huge demand, so he wasn't worried about not having customers. After hanging it up, Du Fan went to check out the bioconversion pool to see what this thing that could convert organisms and minerals looked like. Looking at this incredibly simple bioconversion pool, Du Fan was a little frustrated. He had imagined it to be some cool and massive piece of equipment, but it turned out to be just a pit in the ground that was all there was to it. Looking at the small pool in front of him, Du Fan asked Natasha. Is this really a bioconversion tank? Yes, Lord, although it looks very simple on the outside, there is actually a whole different world underneath. Seeing that Du Fan did not believe her, Natasha patiently explained. Really? I never would have guessed. Du Fan said to Natasha, leaning over the edge of the pool. By the way, Natasha, if I fall, will I be broken down? Du Fan asked curiously. Please rest assured, Overlord, the Zerg will not be disintegrated. Researchers have installed identifying chromosomes in all Zerg units. However, Overlord, you haven't implanted any chromosomes yet, so it's best not to fall in. As Natasha explained, she had a leafcutter ant drag Du Fan away to prevent him from accidentally falling. There's no way around it, Du Fan is just too much of a worry. He almost scared Natasha to death last night. If Du Fan had accidentally fallen into the bioconversion pool, it would have been a disaster. Therefore, Natasha unilaterally decided that before Du Fan became the dominant body, she would keep a close watch on Du Fan to prevent him from encountering any danger. Du Fan sighed helplessly, letting the leafcutter ants drag him away. Du Fan understood that this was Natasha protecting him, but he also had a sense of self-preservation. Natasha wasn't incapable of anything, but she was far too protective of herself, which made Du Fan very uncomfortable. Natasha wouldn't let Du Fan get close to anything dangerous, lest he get hurt. Du Fan, who was being overprotected, was also quite annoyed. It was so boring, he couldn't do anything and could only hide in the cave. He couldn't easily lash out, since Natasha was acting in his best interest and he didn't want to upset her. Besides, with his small frame, even if there were no monsters within 500 meters, he wasn't entirely safe. If I were to carelessly touch a poisonous plant, I could die instantly, or, like last night, almost die of food poisoning. Thinking about this, Du Fan decided to stay here obediently and wait to transform into a dominator, even though it was too boring. Master, if you're really bored, you can control Zerg units through the hive's will, but it requires. What do you need? Du Fan asked eagerly, having found a way to pass the time. Chapter 9. Du Fan glanced at the Zerg hive, and his idea of possessing a Zerg unit instantly shattered. He hadn't fully integrated into the hive's will. It can only do simple things with the will of the hive, things as complicated as possession are still a bit difficult. Without fully integrating with the hive's will, possession can only be achieved through the hive itself. However, having Du Fan lie inside the hive is less appealing than simply staying put and bored. The sticky nutrient solution would definitely feel unpleasant on my skin, and I didn't want to take a cold shower, even though the temperature was pleasant. However, in this god-forsaken place where there are no medicines, it's best not to get sick, lest you be killed by disease. Thinking about this, Du Fan discovered another advantage of the Zerg over other races, their resistance to disease. While some races could rival them, most humans are ordinary races and definitely need medicine. This would create a huge market for pharmaceuticals. Even a small share of this market would be extremely beneficial for one's own development. However, it seems I have no knowledge of medicine, so I'll just keep thinking about it. After all, the Zerg are good at destruction and war, not medicine or logistics. Don't put the cart before the horse and force the Zerg to develop in a direction they are not good at. Du Fan lay listlessly on the bed, while Natasha was quite relaxed, completely free of any work pressure. Natasha, don't you find this troublesome? Through the hive's wool, Du Fan understood that Natasha was currently commanding all the Zerg units, but from Du Fan's perspective, Natasha looked completely relaxed. My lord, this workload is nothing. When I was handling all the work across 30 planes on my own, I was basically working non-stop. Now I even have time to relax, so this little bit of work is quite easy for me. Du Fan broke out in a cold sweat. Only Zerg units would be this crazy. Working tirelessly, Du Fan believed that even at tier 4 and above, no one would be as tireless as Natasha. How could a big shot like this spend their time on management? Just like in fantasy novels, the strong usually live in seclusion behind the scenes, focusing on their cultivation rather than managing worldly affairs. Du Fan believed that the people here were the same. Since there were already insectoids, it wouldn't be a big problem for a cultivation race to come along. Therefore, the above idea was not impossible. Du Fan glanced at Natasha, then decided against chatting with her and told her to rest. Natasha probably won't have much time to rest from now on. It seems like she doesn't need to rest at all. Sigh. Du Fan was a little bored, and having no other choice, he started scrolling through his chat history to see if there was any useful information. Du Fan, who was browsing the chat area, was startled by the sudden tremor. Any transaction information? Du Fan glanced at the private chat area, slightly surprised. He hadn't expected someone to contact him so quickly. Furthermore, it uses a paid private chat area, which has only 3 slots. Each person can have 3 private chat contacts for free, and subsequent contacts need to be unlocked by spending crystals. Once confirmed, contacts cannot be deleted, even if the person has died, they simply disappear without a trace. In short, it's a scam. Each one is more expensive than the last. And once you start a private chat, if the other person doesn't accept your private chat and doesn't reply within 48 hours, you'll lose a spot, while the other person gets away with nothing. So it's not like you can just add them and start a private chat, you have to get their reply first. Therefore, don't try to ruin someone's private chat through sheer numbers. That's not allowed. The system, that lousy thing, does have its limitations. Of course, that person was too foolish to reply to everyone, so there's nothing that can be done. Fortunately, that guy didn't design the private chat to be a pay-to-speak model. If it were, that would have been interesting. However, you don't have to pay money, you can still communicate in the trading area. It's like a group chat, with multiple people, but the number of participants isn't particularly large. The seller is very likely to not see your message, and there's also the risk of price gouging due to cutthroat competition. It's far more convenient to chat privately, and you might even snag a bargain. However, using a private chat slot so easily could easily result in losing a free private chat spot if you're not careful. That's really something. Let's see what he has to say. If he's not satisfied, he won't agree. After all, the crystal is still very important right now, and he can't afford to squander it. Moreover, losing a private chat slot in exchange for a useless piece of information makes Du Fan want to die. Natasha, you traded a ton of chalcocite for a pound of my nutrient solution. Do you think I lost out or gained? Du Fan glanced at the information about copper ore and asked Natasha. My lord, we don't have specific names for our minerals, and even if we did, we wouldn't necessarily name the same ore the same. However, my lord, you can inquire about the mineral's grade. Du Fan recalled the information he knew. Mineral grade refers to the rarity of the mineral. The higher the grade of the mineral, the more energy it contains, and high-grade minerals are also essential for forging weapons. However, it costs 1 spot to gamble on this ore reaching tier 1, so I'm still a little worried. However, after thinking about it, Du Fan figured it should have reached tier 1. After all, the chance of tier 1 ore appearing is quite high. For tier 2 and higher minerals, you'll need to attack unknown dimensions. It's very difficult for player dimensions to spawn tier 2 and higher minerals. Of course, if you're incredibly lucky, then disregard what I said. However, these things happen with extremely low probability, and even if they do happen, they're not easy to find. Therefore, that person is basically either a first-order mineral or a common mineral. A second-order mineral is unlikely and would be quite difficult to find. The price of common minerals needs to be increased, since the amount of crystals that can be converted from common minerals is far too small to compare with that of first-tier minerals. May I ask about your mineral grade? Du Fan couldn't help but admire the chat function. It was incredibly convenient. You could type whatever you wanted to say. Don't worry if you have poor typing skills, it's very friendly to illiterate people as well. The chalcocite I mined is a first-order mineral, not a common mineral. Trader Tian Yingying immediately replied to Du Fan. At this moment, Tian Yingying stared intently at her private chat interface. Tian Yingying was extremely lucky. She had obtained the incredibly powerful race, the Tiger Ant clan. Possessing extraordinary reproductive abilities and formidable combat power, Tian Yingying unfortunately arrived in a plane where farming and hunting are impossible, a place filled with mountains. If Tian Yingying, like Du Fan, had come to the forest plain instead of this mountain plain, then Tian Yingying's development speed might have been just as fast as Du Fan's. However, Tian Yingying arrived in a mountainous plain. Although there was no way to obtain food here, fortunately, there was an exceptionally rich supply of minerals. There were as many as 5 or 6 kinds of minerals exposed on the surface alone. This place is very rich, and it contains mostly first-order minerals, but it's not of much use to Tian Yingying right now. Like Du Fan, Tian Yingying was also a recent college graduate. However, unlike Du Fan, Tian Yingying was not an orphan and was not a pampered young lady. After arriving here, Tian Yingying was a little troubled because life here was too difficult for her. There were no delicious dishes, no soft beds, not even water for washing. They could only sleep on stones and were barely fed. The food sold in the trading area was too expensive, except for Du Fan, whose prices hadn't increased much. That's why Tian Yingying came to ask Du Fan. If Du Fan knew the situation in Tian Yingying's plane, he would definitely be very envious. After all, there are first-tier minerals everywhere, so Du Fan could quickly raise a powerful army and start a plane war ahead of schedule. The standard for initiating a dimensional war is having a force of 1000. Du Fan is limited by crystals, while Tian Yingying is limited by food. Both of them have resources that the other lacks. Really? That's great. Can we start the transaction now? Du Fan was overjoyed and quickly replied. Okay, I'd like to ask if you can provide this much food every day. Tian Yingying asked patiently. Nutrient solutions, being tasteless, pose no problem for tiger ants, solving their food problem and reducing the need for them to purchase food. The food sold by other vendors was far too little and too expensive, it simply couldn't compare to Du Fan's. However, this was a little unacceptable to Tian Yingying, so she would still buy other foods to satisfy her appetite. However, it's impossible to use more resources to buy food by selling flowers, so selling Du Fan's flowers is more suitable. They're not expensive, and the quantity is plentiful. Sure, as long as you can provide me with 1 ton of chalcocite every day, I can provide you with 1 pound of nutrient solution every day. Du Fan replied to Tian Yingying. Okay. Tian Yingying was overjoyed. 1 pound of nutrient solution could basically meet the needs of the 30 tiger ants under her command. Tiger ants consume relatively little food compared to other species. While they cannot compare to the insectoid race, they certainly have an advantage over other species. Furthermore, tiger ants lack a sense of taste and hunger, which is a significant advantage. Therefore, there's no need to worry about them disliking the nutrient solution, perfectly solving their food problem. As for that meal of minerals, the wealthy and powerful Tian Yingying didn't take it seriously at all. She could harvest more than 10 tons of minerals tomorrow. Without refining equipment to process the minerals, she wouldn't be able to use them all. Exchanging them for food would still be quite profitable. So both of them felt they had gained something, and the other had lost something. Tian Yingying was overjoyed, not only because she had solved the food problem for the tiger ants, but also because she had found a long-term supplier. Du Fan also found a buyer who could handle his excess nutrient solution and provide him with Tier 1 minerals daily, accelerating his development. Perhaps after we have more insect hives, we can sell her even more minerals. Tiger ants aren't just good at fighting, they can also mine. However, they're completely clueless about farming. This place is quite friendly to players in the early to mid-game, except for the lack of food. After all, the minerals here are so abundant, and there are even tiger ants that specialize in mining them, so there's absolutely no need to worry about mineral issues. The only problem is probably the food issue. Because there are so many minerals, there are very few edible animals in Tian Yingying's world, and even trees are rare. Chapter 10. A ton of chalcocite slid out from the spatial passage that opened up beside Du Fan. Once the transaction is completed, the system immediately sends the traded items away. However, the seller needs to prepare the container for the liquid. Fortunately, the leafcutter worker ants have carved stone jars for themselves to hold the nutrient solution. Otherwise, how to provide a container for the nutrient solution became a problem that Du Fan needed to address. Looking at the ton of chalcocite in front of him, Du Fan was extremely excited. That's so much crystal. Master, after absorbing these minerals, we should obtain 100 units of crystal. This afternoon, we can begin constructing the second insect hive. Natasha glanced briefly at the copper ore and said excitedly. Du Fan did the math, 1 ton of chalcocite can yield 100 crystals through the bioconversion pool. Not bad. Natasha, I have a question. If a building specifically designed for processing minerals were used, how much energy could it convert into energy? Du Fan asked curiously, but he quickly regretted asking Natasha that question. It can be converted into 120 units of crystal, with a 10% chance of producing 1 unit of source element. After listening to Natasha's explanation, Du Fan dejectedly hid to the side, wondering how many 20-unit crystals and a little bit of source element he had lost. Source elements are essential for the production of advanced units and are extremely precious. Imagine how many units of source elements we'll lose. Heartbroken, Du Fan hid in a corner, pacing dejectedly. Natasha didn't know how to comfort Du Fan, so she could only have the leafcutter ants move the ore. Natasha was in a dilemma, she simply didn't know how to comfort Du Fan. After all, the previous rulers were not like Du Fan, who was always frustrated, nor were they as ambitious as the previous rulers, they simply wanted eternal life. However, Natasha believed that as the Zerg grew stronger, their power expanded, and their life experiences became richer, Du Fan's ambitions would certainly not stop there. Master, although we have suffered some losses, it is for the future of the swarm, and these losses are acceptable. Our most important task now is to develop the swarm, not to calculate the losses. Natasha forced herself to think of words to comfort Du Fan. I understand, Natasha. Du Fan quickly cheered up. Although it hurt, he knew it was a price he had to pay. Losing some crystals to accelerate development is still quite profitable, since the demand for crystals isn't particularly high right now. Natasha, has the location for the second insect hive been chosen? Du Fan asked Natasha. My lord, 5 suitable sites have been discovered for building a Zerg hive. Given our current development trajectory, the second hive should be established in the northeast direction, approximately 600 meters from us. Yes, Natasha, make a plan for exploring the void below. We'll begin our first exploration after the initial monster invasion, but don't forget our primary objective is to launch the interdimensional war before they do. Du Fan glanced at the underground cavern and said listlessly, "This place is really boring, there's practically nowhere to walk around. I can only hope the research unit doesn't arrive too late, making me overmind too late. For now, I'll just keep looking at Zerg information to kill some time." After several bloody battles, only 11 Swiftbringers remained in the swarm. One of them was severely wounded, with its sharp forelimbs broken off, its carapace damaged, and one eye blinded. It was only clinging to life because of the Zerg's strong vitality and could die at any moment. The elite Swiftbug swung its claws and finished it off. The Swiftbug didn't seem to care, and Natasha didn't see anything wrong with it either. However, Du Fan found it hard to accept that his men hadn't died at the hands of the enemy, but rather at the hands of their own people. "Natasha, why didn't you stop it?" Du Fan asked Natasha grimly. With Natasha's abilities, she couldn't possibly be unaware of this matter, yet she hadn't stopped the swift-walking insect. "My lord, please let me explain." Sensing Du Fan's overwhelming rage, Natasha hurriedly said. "Fine, give me a proper explanation." Du Fan stared at Natasha and said. Although he knew Natasha wouldn't betray him, the Swiftbug's behavior still displeased Du Fan, so naturally he wanted Natasha to give him a reasonable explanation. "Master, his injuries are too severe. It's difficult for him to return to the hive alone. Sending someone to escort him back will affect their hunting efficiency. Besides, the crystals needed to heal him could produce a pair of Swiftbugs, the cost-effectiveness is far inferior." After listening, Du Fan fell into deep thought, wondering whether he should save it or not, even though he knew that Zerg units had no emotions and no bonds. Hero-level units like Natasha have absolutely no feelings for these mindless Zerg units, and they don't care about these mass-producible Zerg units. They are only responsible to Du Fan, everything else is optional. They'd even risk their own lives in critical moments, let alone Zerg units. Moreover, for Natasha, the priority is to accelerate the Zerg's development. Therefore, spending the crystals needed to produce a pair of Swiftbugs to treat a single ordinary Swiftbug would definitely be a waste. However, it's impossible to let it die out on its own. It might be captured and studied by hostile forces, although the possibility is small. But we still need to guard against the future, so we dealt with it and disposed of its remains. This is the best course of action, Du Fan sighed helplessly. Although he was furious, from the Zerg's perspective, wasn't this the most reasonable course of action? It's unrealistic to expect one's own values to influence the Zerg, doing so would negatively impact the Zerg's development. "It's all right." Du Fan waved his hand and said to Natasha. "Your Majesty, you shouldn't be so soft-hearted. Put away your indecisiveness, only then can you become a qualified ruler." "I understand, Natasha. Let me think about it." Du Fan sat down on the ground and began to think. Although he was an orphan, Du Fan did not feel lonely. On the contrary, he felt like he had a warm family, just like those who had parents. Moreover, the grandfather in the orphanage was very kind to him, but he had died when he was in the third year of junior high school. It was at that time that Du Fan developed a fear of death and hoped to gain immortality. As he entered high school, Du Fan realized that he was indulging in wishful thinking, and that it was impossible for him to achieve this. However, after arriving here, Du Fan sensed the unusual nature of this place and the presence of a powerful insectoid race, and his desire for immortality was rekindled. He also became an emperor, but Du Fan wasn't quite sure how to be an excellent emperor. However, after listening to Natasha's words, Du Fan wavered a little, wondering if he should put away his merciful side. How about becoming tougher, turning into an iron-fisted ruler. Du Fan sat on the ground, lost in thought. Natasha didn't disturb him, letting him think things through on his own. It wouldn't be right to interfere too much with Du Fan's personal thoughts. After a moment's thought, Du Fan decided to give up thinking. He was who he was, and there was no need for him to become what others wanted him to be. He just needed to be himself. Since he couldn't make a decision, he would leave it to the Zerg hero. In any case, they would risk being killed by him to eliminate the enemies he had let go out of mercy, so there was no need to force himself to become a ruthless ruler. Thinking of this, Du Fan stretched, drank some nutrient solution, and prepared to take a nap. The swarm of swift bugs was replenished, 18 swift bugs joined the hunting party, and the hunt continued. A hungry python slowly slithered through the forest. It knew that hasty actions would make it difficult to catch its prey, so it had to move patiently, hide itself, and surprise its prey. The giant python slowly crawled to the vicinity of the swift-walking insects that had come to its aid. Looking at these creatures it had never seen before, they seemed quite weak, mostly at Tier 1, Star 1, with only one reaching Tier 1, Star 2. They posed little threat to it, so it decided to make them its lunch. The mosquito looked at the giant python, its back muscles twitching. The next moment, a sharp bone needle shot out, flying straight towards the giant python. However, this time, unlike before, it didn't pierce the python's body directly, it merely pierced into it. The giant python glared angrily at the two needle-like insects, the very ones that had just injured it. As the giant python stared at the needle-like insects, the swift-walking insects launched an attack. Despite the vast difference in strength, this did not deter the swift-walking insects from attacking the giant python. The giant python swept its tail, striking the swift bug. The quick-reacting 2-star swift bug gripped the python's body tightly. However, its forelimbs could not penetrate the python's body, and even 2-star swift bugs could not harm it, let alone 1-star swift bugs. The only thing they can do is risk their lives to hold it back, giving the spiky mosquitoes a chance to attack. Even if this big guy is very difficult to deal with, the spiky mosquito's venom is not to be underestimated. Given enough time, it will surely perish on the spot. The swift-walking insects circled around it rapidly, constantly harassing it. The python, impatient, twisted its body, swatting away all the little creatures that blocked its way. This giant python didn't rely on heat sensing, but on its pair of large, bright eyes. Now that those eyes have been knocked away by the needle-like insects, the blind python can only attack haphazardly. The violently shaking python flung the 2-star swift-walking insect off its back, which slammed heavily into a tree. The force was so great that a branch pierced through its body, leaving it hanging from the branch. The swift-walking insect helplessly flailed its limbs, completely unable to escape its predicament on its own, and could only watch the battlefield unfold. As time went by, most of the swift bugs that had been besieged had been whipped to death by the berserk python. At the same time, 3 swift bugs, like the 2-star swift bugs, were left hanging on the trees, unable to move. With the final stinger of the needle mosquito fired, the giant python reached its limit and collapsed helplessly. Before reaching the 4th rank, every creature has its own limits. Prolonged battles will reduce their physical and spiritual strength to a very low level, eventually rendering them unable to fight, overwhelming them with the swarm of insects, and causing them to die in the sea of insects. The giant python collapsed weakly to the ground. Although it had lost the ability to resist, this did not mean that the python had lost its life. At this moment, the python, clinging to its last breath, lay helplessly on the ground, quietly waiting for death to come. Du Fan wasn't surprised to learn that a 5-star monster had fallen to the swarm. After all, it wasn't powerful enough to ignore individual combat strength and move freely. After dealing with the giant python, the swarm carried its carcass back to their nest, preparing to escort the leafcutter ants to build a second nest and expand their ranks. Du Fan stared at the enormous python, slightly awestruck. It was simply too huge. It must be at least 14 meters long. At its widest point, one person couldn't possibly hold it, it's just too huge. As the giant python's carcass was thrown into the bioconversion pool, the pool demonstrated to Du Fan how it worked. As the liquid continued to boil, the giant python's corpse rapidly corroded, transforming into crystal. This behemoth could produce 120 units of crystal for Du Fan, an income far exceeding the cost he incurred. After throwing in the corpse, the swarm led the leafcutter ants to set up their second nest. "Master, we've obtained 3 units of source element. I can roughly guess why that swift bug was able to advance." "Oh, why?" Du Fan was also a little curious. After all, if he could figure it out, he could mass-produce elite units. Zerg units can either be promoted to elite units or their hives can be upgraded, granting all Zerg units a 1-star promotion. Therefore, this point is still very important. Dominator, it devoured a beast core, this thing can convert into source elements. Wait, you don't mean that guy ingested source elements and thus achieved advancement, do you? Du Fan immediately sensed something was wrong and said to Natasha. "Yes, Your Majesty, I'm sorry, your plans have failed." "It's okay, it's just a beautiful fantasy anyway, it doesn't matter if it doesn't work out." Du Fan said it lightly, but he was actually in great pain inside. However, such a good thing could not possibly happen. After learning that he had obtained 3 source elements, Du Fan knew that the plan had already fallen through. However, human greed still led people to hope that they could obtain elite units without using source materials, but unfortunately, this idea was not realized. As for using high-level resources like source elements to exchange for elite units of swift bugs, that's simply a waste of resources, it's an extreme example of squandering wealth. However, it's worthwhile to train a few elite needle bugs. After all, needle bugs deal far more damage than raptors, and unlike raptors, they don't have to rush in and risk their lives to delay the enemy, giving needle bugs an opportunity to deal damage. Meanwhile, the swarm of insects led the leafcutter ants to the chosen nest location and began constructing the second nest. The leafcutter worker ant burrows into the ground, absorbs the crystals it carries, and then its body begins to expand continuously. From the outside, it looks like the earth has a pimple, as the leafcutter worker ants' bodies continue to swell. An hour later, the bulge in the ground burst open, scattering mud everywhere. The velociraptor, bathed in the mud rain, remained unmoved, silently guarding the changing leafcutter ants. As the leafcutter ants continuously transformed their bodies, a new nest appeared here after 4 hours. Thus, as night fell, the second hive was born, and 10 larvae appeared beside it. Chapter 11. With the establishment of the second hive, Natasha used the special connection between the hives to transfer some of the crystals there, allowing a new batch of units to survive and join the swarm to continue hunting monsters, acquiring more crystals, and expanding the hive. As for why energy can be transmitted, that involves something else. According to Natasha's explanation, it's an application of electromagnetic waves. Through electromagnetic waves in the command room, the hive can exchange energy. Even if the hive is destroyed, all stored resources can be moved out before the destruction, minimizing the losses. Moreover, the Zerg have done a near-perfect job in this regard. As long as the distance isn't too great, they can achieve almost 100% transmission. Du Fan also asked Natasha what distance could achieve 100% transmission. Natasha explained that at this stage, as long as the distance does not exceed 30 kilometers, 100% transmission can be achieved. Moreover, the most impressive thing is that this ability can also achieve interdimensional teleportation, but this is not something that my current hive can do. It can only be done after reaching the 4th tier hive and being able to open wormholes. Although this is far away from him, it doesn't affect Du Fan's vision for the future. Anyway, it's both far and near, so let's see how things go in the future. Du Fan took a sip of the nutrient solution, opened his private chat with his business friend Tian Ying, and inquired about her. Tian Ying, I can provide an extra pound of nutrient solution. Do you want it? Seeing that Tian Ying did not reply, Du Fan assumed that she did not need any more nutrient solution, so he put the pound of nutrient solution on the trading market. What was Tian Ying doing at this moment? Tian Ying was alone in the stone house, sitting cross-legged, quietly meditating. Tian Ying cultivates the human cultivation technique previously confiscated by the Tiger Ant clan, the ice condensation jade technique, a low-grade heaven rank technique, which is a prerequisite for the divine level technique ice god technique. After all, the Tiger Ant clan performed quite well in the last interdimensional war, fighting alongside their suzerain nation and plundering a considerable amount of resources, including cultivation techniques. However, their good fortune was short-lived. The suzerain state of the Tiger Ant clan, due to its abundant resources, was besieged by several other powerful forces and eventually annexed, thus withdrawing them from the Great Racial War. Although they failed, the Tiger Ant clan's gains were preserved and not lost, so they can still provide Tian Ying with cultivation techniques. As for the Zerg, since they haven't been summoned, there's been no gain, and naturally, no cultivation techniques for Du Fan. However, even if there were, Natasha would most likely not let Du Fan cultivate them. After all, in Natasha's view, the Overlord is the most powerful, and that weapon, which combines the best genes of the entire Zerg, is far stronger than the strength they painstakingly cultivate. Tian Ying was initially skeptical about the cultivation methods provided by the Tiger Ant clan, but after cultivating for one night, Tian Ying found that although she hadn't slept all night, she was still very energetic, and even her skin had become smoother and more beautiful. No woman is bothered by her appearance. Since cultivating this skill can make her more beautiful and also allow her to cast ice spells, she's doing it. Therefore, Tian Ying diligently practiced her cultivation techniques and focused on her training. Of course, she also kept a close eye on matters within her race, and almost all major events had to pass through her hands. Tian Ying remained quite wary of these tiger ants. After all, they were not of the same species, and as the saying goes, those who are not of our kind will surely have different intentions. She had to be cautious of these tiger ants. If they rebelled against his rule, he would die on the spot. Fortunately, they didn't have such thoughts now, but that didn't mean they wouldn't have them in the future. Therefore, it is still necessary to be vigilant. Tian Ying knows that as long as she does not exploit them and treats them well, these simple and honest tiger ants will basically not have any thoughts of rebellion. Apart from Du Fan, the other capable lords all knew they needed to control their subordinate races well to prevent them from harboring rebellious intentions. Every day was extremely arduous, with nights spent cultivating and days spent dealing with government affairs, making their lives a monotonous routine. Unlike Du Fan, who's become so bored he's practically sick, spending his days sitting there doing nothing but daydreaming. The next morning, after finishing her cultivation, Tian Ying found a message in her private chat from Du Fan. Tian Ying stretched and then looked at the message Du Fan had sent. Du Fan, sorry, I was meditating last night and turned off private message notifications. Du Fan glanced at it and, through the word meditation, guessed that Tian Ying was practicing some kind of cultivation technique, which he found truly enviable. It's okay, so will you take these 2 kilograms of nutrient solution? Last night, no one was willing to buy the nutrient solution at their own price. They used the fact that the nutrient solution had no taste as an excuse to force Du Fan to lower the price. Even worse, some people spout platitudes about benevolence and morality, wanting Du Fan to give them away for free and support these complete strangers. Du Fan simply doesn't understand how they can be so shameless. They have absolutely no bottom line. I don't even know them. I have no obligation to support them. Besides, they are all in their prime, young and strong. Why would they need my support? However, the mastermind behind the scenes was quite compassionate. The elderly and children were not forced to join the dimensional war game. According to him, they lived in a place where they had no worries about food or clothing and lived without any troubles. Du Fan definitely wouldn't agree to their request, so he could only continue hanging up. It's great that Tian Yingying is still buying her nutrient solution, and even buying more of it. Okay, Tian Yingying, I can get more nutrient solution in the future. Can you buy it all? Du Fan asked Tian Yingying tentatively. If possible, finding a major client in advance would definitely be a good deal. You can't possibly lower the price to sell to them, that would be too much of a loss. Of course. Tian Yingying replied to Du Fan with great joy. After all, tiger ants reproduce very quickly. If it weren't for the food problem, which Tian Yingying strictly forbade them from having offspring, they would go bankrupt in no time. Buying food from others is definitely not as convenient as Du Fan's nutrient solution, which is not only available in larger quantities but also cheaper. Most importantly, their own opinion is that they limit their ability to have children. If they can obtain more food, then the conflict between the two can be alleviated. Therefore, this is extremely important to Tian Yingying. As for purchasing the necessary minerals, sorry, for Tian Yingying, there's plenty of other things, but plenty of ores. There are countless minerals underground, and the tiger ants are all skilled miners, so they don't care much about the minerals that are traded. As for weapons that can be made from minerals, that's still too far off for Tian Yingying. Let's resolve the current conflicts first. Like I said, don't take the minerals seriously at all. Du Fan, how much nutrient solution can you provide me now? Don't worry about the ore, I can provide that. Upon hearing Tian Yingying's words, Du Fan's jaw dropped. Just how rich was Tian Yingying? Sorry, I don't have any more nutrient solution to sell, but I'll definitely have more in the future. Alright. Don't forget me when you have nutrient solution in the future. After closing the private chat and meeting up, Du Fan sat down. Minerals kept falling from the spatial wormhole next to him, and were then dragged away by the leafcutter ants to be refined into crystals. Just how rich is Tian Yingying? Du Fan said sourly. He thought he was already incredibly wealthy, but he never expected that Tian Yingying's luck was even better than his. It's truly unfair. However, having the Zerg myself doesn't seem like a huge loss. Oh well, what's not mine shouldn't be overthought. Instead of blaming luck, I should work hard and take over a mineral plane myself. Chapter 12. Du Fan sat on the stone bed, drinking the tasteless nutrient solution. The first monster invasion would officially begin after midnight tonight. After drinking the nutrient solution for 2 days, Du Fan felt that his taste buds had degenerated. At this point, Du Fan already had 3 Zerg hives. With the establishment of the second Zerg hive, the Zerg settlement's development speed was once again boosted. In just 1 day, they had gathered enough resources to build the third insect hive. If it weren't for the bad luck of encountering a monster that was currently impossible to kill, resulting in the annihilation of their entire army and forcing Du Fan to rebuild a team, they would have already gathered enough resources for the fourth insect hive, along with the minerals they traded with Tian Yingying today. Even if he collects all the resources, Du Fan doesn't plan to build a fourth insect hive. He wants to reserve some resources for later use. Who knows how fierce the monster invasion will be tonight? He doesn't want to run out of funds for recovery, that would be terrible. At the same time, for their own safety, the forces of the 3 hives will move to the main hive to protect Duvan. This could potentially cause damage to the other hives, which would require funds for reconstruction. At this moment, everyone is preparing for battle. Tonight will be a watershed moment. Those who are capable will survive, while those who are not will end their game. No one knows whether death after failure is real or virtual. Everything is unknown, and no one is willing to risk their life. Therefore, tonight's monster invasion will be a battle that determines life and death. Tian Yingying directed the tiger ants to build a simple wall to block the advancing monsters. Although Tian Yingying had never played military-themed games, it didn't mean she didn't know about them. After all, she had watched anti-Japanese war dramas. So, Tian Yingying directed the tiger ants to surround the small hill where they were. Concentrating all forces to defend one place can also alleviate the problem of insufficient defensive strength in that area. When Tian Yingying acquired the tiger ant clan, there weren't many soldier ants left. Also, because there wasn't enough food at the beginning, Tian Yingying had no way to provide food for the tiger ants to reproduce. After making the deal with Du Fan, it was only on the third day that they received enough food, beyond just enough for daily sustenance, to support their reproduction. If the tiger ant clan weren't worker ants with virtually no combat ability, only knowing how to mine, sending them into battle would basically be sending them to their deaths. Otherwise, Tian Yingying would have wanted to put them in the army for temporary use. Unfortunately, this was not an option. Putting aside the possibility of losing the loyalty of the tiger ant clan, Tian Yingying couldn't even get past her own conscience. Therefore, she could only drastically reduce her forces and concentrate on protecting the newly hatched tiger ants, worker ants, and herself. Meanwhile, in Du Fan's area, a burly man wielding an iron hammer smashed the head of a giant wolf with a single blow, followed by a group of gigantic creatures that were neither human nor human. Among normal people, this man's physique would be considered exceptionally tall, but among this group of creatures, he was the shortest, standing at 2.1 meters tall, only reaching their chests. They are generally 2.3 meters tall, with the best among them reaching an astonishing 2.5 meters. Their faces are not human, but animal faces. They are the spotted hyenas, one of the orc races, savage and ferocious, yet also full of intelligence. They are different from the spotted hyenas on Earth. They are not matrilineal but patrilineal, with males as the dominant force, followed by children, and finally the women of the tribe. Like feudalism in ancient times, they favored sons over daughters. They were also incredibly ferocious, only obeying the strong. Because spotted hyenas would not actively attack creatures stronger than themselves, the frequency of tribal chiefs changing was not particularly high. Basically, when tribal chiefs changed, it was because the old chief was old and frail, and a new challenger challenged the old chief, thus changing the dynasty. Therefore, the man in front of them was not the leader of the spotted hyena tribe. It could be said that the lords of the orc tribe were all quite unlucky. It was already a miracle that they were alive. To think they could rule them was a favor to them, as they were already doing him a favor by not being dead. However, if you can rule them, they will be among the most loyal soldiers, and they are also brave and skilled in battle. At the same level, the orcs with their larger size are very strong. In order to survive these traitorous spotted hyenas, the man relied on his years of hard-earned martial arts skills and, after paying a heavy price, finally managed to kill one of the spotted hyenas. Although he had killed one of them, to the man's surprise, the leader did not seek revenge. Instead, the leader accepted him. It was this life-or-death battle that led to the spotted hyenas accepting him and making him a member of their pack. After becoming one of them, in order to become stronger and reclaim their lord, the man followed their example and tattooed his own beast soul on his body, thus beginning the unique cultivation journey of the orc race. Beast soul tattoo is an extremely special type of tattoo. It is made by using the blood of a hunted monster to create a special dye, which is then used to apply the tattoo. In this way, the person who gets the tattoo can possess the abilities of that monster, and may even have their physical attributes enhanced. However, this has drawbacks. The number of tattoos each creature can have is extremely limited, and the pain endured by the body increases with each additional tattoo. If the pain of the first tattoo is like being beaten with a stick, then the pain of the second tattoo is like childbirth. This pain originates from the depths of the soul. Even if you can shut down the pain receptors in your nervous system, you cannot stop it. Therefore, every orc warrior is extremely cautious. Many orc warriors, unable to bear the excruciating pain, suffer mental breakdowns and become mentally impaired, ultimately being abandoned by their tribe. Therefore, each orc warrior typically only gets 3 tattoos, getting more than that is extremely difficult, and only geniuses can achieve it. Wang Lisheng, you did a great job, kid. You showed absolutely no signs of being a soft-hearted human. The chief laughed and said that Wang Lisheng's talent was unparalleled. The chief believed that after Wang Lisheng surpassed him, he would definitely be able to lead his tribe to a new level. Therefore, he was willing to sacrifice his own life. After all, his goal was to lead his people to new heights, which was also the wish of successive leaders. Every leader had paid for this, and he had no fear even when it was his turn. Thank you for the compliment, chief. What's up tonight? Wang Lisheng remained composed, showing no airs of a lord, and spoke humbly. Of course I haven't forgotten, my children. Let's go back and get some sleep, we have a big battle to fight tonight. The chieftain looked up at the sky and laughed heartily. He was filled with anticipation for the battle that night. After all, the matter had only been rumored among the tribe, and as a battle maniac, he had long wanted to see just how dangerous this battle would be. Back in Dufan's plain, the swarm is approaching the main hive. Along the way, all monsters that might join the monster siege are hunted down by the swarm in an effort to acquire as many resources as possible. The swift bugs darted through the forest. This time, Natasha was smarter. Instead of gathering all the insectoids together, she searched separately. Without the microbees, the swift bugs and needle bugs couldn't discern the strength of their opponents. The only one who can discern the opponent's strength is Natasha, but Natasha's ability range is only half the radius of the main hive, so she can't cover very far. So, they had to swallow the bitter pill they had to swallow that day. Fortunately, the Zerg had no shortage of combat units. It was this time of the game that made Du Fan feel deeply distressed. He was stuck the day before the monster invasion. As a result, the Zerg, with a population of 60, only had 40 units left. They couldn't produce anything to survive, even though they had resources, because they had no larvae. Du Fan had never imagined he wouldn't face this situation, given how powerful the Zerg were. However, it still happened. He could only hope that tonight's monster invasion wouldn't be too strong and wouldn't break through Natasha's organization's defenses. But Du Fan knew he was deceiving himself. Having read the relevant materials, Du Fan knew that the intensity of this monster invasion varied according to the strength of the monsters. With his strength, how could he possibly have an easy time? However, Du Fan was still quite unsure whether he could safely survive this monster invasion. Just as Du Fan was worrying, he suddenly remembered that he seemed to have built the main insect nest in an extremely bad place. Although it was in a cave, it could only be entered through the cave entrance. He originally thought it was safe here, but now it seemed that he had dug a pit for himself, with a huge hole under his feet. Who knows if monsters will suddenly appear from there, and you might not even know how you died. Natasha. Du Fan called out to Natasha nervously. My lord, please rest assured, I am fully prepared. There is no need to worry. I will definitely protect you, my lord, Natasha said to Du Fan. Natasha, how are you going to protect me? I haven't seen any offensive or defensive capabilities from you. Don't you still have to rely on the Zerg units to fight me? Du Fan asked Natasha, puzzled. My lord, I do possess combat capabilities, but my range is limited, I can't stray more than 50 meters from the Zerg hive. Although I haven't revealed my weapons and methods, it doesn't mean I lack combat power. I've simply concealed myself for your safety. If I manage to break through the Zerg's defenses tonight, then I will intervene. What else is going on? So, Natasha, what level is your strength at? Du Fan asked curiously. It's probably a first tier, 8th star weapon. Really? That's great. Du Fan breathed a sigh of relief. Now that he knew Natasha had the combat power of a tier 1 8-star and had made thorough preparations, what did he have to worry about? No matter how much he worried, he couldn't change the facts. He could only watch the Zerg units and Natasha. With his skinny arms and legs, he couldn't do anything about it. After glancing at the patrolling swift insects, Du Fan stretched. Reassured by Natasha's words, Du Fan decided to take a nap so he would have the energy to watch the battle that evening.
वीडियोस बनाने हैं, फिल्मोरा है ना?